In today's notes, we're going to be taking a look at the trade between the colonies and England. So we've looked at the first two areas where English settlers started coming over, starting with Jamestown and Virginia, and then Massachusetts, and the areas that were settled by the Pilgrims and the Puritans. We're going to shift a little bit in these notes and start looking at the relationship between the colonies and England. In particular, we're going to look with these notes at the economic relationship, which was dominated by something called the Navigation Acts. So first off, why did England bother having colonies? For one, the goal of a colony is to make money. So how do you make money off colonies? Well, really two main ways. One is that you can get raw materials easily and cheaply. So products that would be available in the colonies but not necessarily in England. And you can get things like lumber and different crops and unfinished materials. And colonies provide a nice place for people in England to sell their goods to. So people who made things in England would want to get them overseas and sell them to people living in British colonies. In 1660, England decided to pass some laws that would help make sure that they achieved their goals with their colonies. And these laws were called the Navigation Acts. Very important for us to understand what the Navigation Acts are and how they set up the economic relationship between colonies and England. So here's the main things that they said. First off, colonies were not allowed to sell certain products to foreign countries. And mostly those were rare products, things that were hard to get, things that were expensive, and England wanted them. So some of those products included fur, sugar, tobacco, rice, indigo, flour, some of those raw materials that were very valuable. And England said, you can only sell those to us. Another part of the Navigation Acts said there are certain products that you can only buy from England. You couldn't buy them from foreign countries. You could only buy them from England. For example, textiles and ironware, things that were made in England. The rule was you could only buy those from England. And another rule was that you were not allowed to use foreign ships for trading. You were only allowed to use English ships. Well, what does foreign mean? Foreign particularly meant places like France, Spain, and Holland, who were England's competition, their biggest competition for colonial markets, for buying and selling goods and making money. So what's the deal with these rules? Who benefits from the rules? One group was British merchants and manufacturers and ship owners, right? Because if you're making things and selling things in England, these rules help you out because the colonists have to buy some things from England. The colonists can only sell some things to England, and they have to use British ships. If you owned ships in the colonies, these rules benefited you because you were only allowed to use English ships for trading. But so that included if you had the colonies had ship owners, you could use those ships because those were English. Before these laws were passed, and this is important to understand because it's going to tie into the revolutionary period and how we end up wanting to break away from England, before the laws were passed, Britain pretty much ignored the colonies for about 50 years. And this was what was called benign neglect, which basically means ignoring the colonies, but it was harmless. So they sort of let the colonies do what they wanted to do. So then the question is, well, why did England stop doing this? Why stop the policy of benign neglect? For one, the political system in England had become more stable. For the previous 20 years, there had been a period of civil war in England, and so people in England, especially the politicians, were more concerned about what was going on inside of England. They didn't really have the time or the desire to worry about what was going on in the colonies. Both of those came out at once. I'm not sure why. A second important reason that England stopped the policy of benign neglect was that they realized the American colonies were succeeding. More and more people were settling there, and the colonies were becoming more and more valuable. So you can certainly see, if you're in England, passing these rules sounds like a good idea, right? We want to make money off of the colonies. That's the goal. But many people in the colonies weren't happy about it. They preferred that benign neglect. They preferred being left alone. So what happens in response to the Navigation Acts is some people cheated. They began to cheat and trade illegally, and that is what is called smuggling. They broke the rules and smuggled their goods to foreign countries or used ships that weren't British. In some way, they broke the rules. And so we will be playing a game in class where you guys will actually get to practice these rules and maybe even try to break those rules and smuggle some goods.